Mo, quick question. Is the start button still with you? Zoom has been having.
No, I don't have the start button.
That's crazy. I can't see it on my screen anymore.
You mean the start webinar?
Yeah, the start webinar button. It should be on top of the screen. As a host,
yeah,
I should be able to see it.
I'm definitely not the host, because if I try to share screen, it tells me I'm not the host.
Okay, let me try something else. Let me see if because I previously made you host.
Mm-hmm.
Let me make you host again and see if it comes up.
I can see it now on my side, start webinar.
Can you see it?
I can see it on my side, yeah.
Okay, please start webinar and then make me host again.
Okay.
Remember what we did.
Okay. Okay, guys, webinar starting. Brian, your host again.
Good morning. It's good to see quite a few people have jumped onto the call. Great to see all the people that are nice and early, right on time, to catch up with us on this fantastic webinar. I've certainly been looking forward to it. It's the blueprint for human-centric digital transformations, the power of people and tech in elevating human work. I hope you catch some of those keywords I've thrown in there. There will be a test at the end of this session. But great to have all of you that have started to come onto this call. Some good numbers. And if you've been on a few of these webinars before, you know a couple of rules that we'd like to set to get ourselves going. If you'd like to communicate with us, please in the chat select all panelists and attendees. And if you want to send us a message so we can all interact with you in the chat as we proceed for our session today. So as you come in, let us know your name, perhaps your company as well, where you are dialing in from. It will be good to know. We'll give it a few more minutes as we let others kind of join in our session. So, but in the interim, let us know in the chat by selecting all panelists and attendees, your name, perhaps your business, where you are dialing from could be useful. I am in a beautiful Pretoria today. Fantastic weather today, I must say. We haven't had this type of weather in the last couple of days, but it's absolutely fantastic today. So good to have all of you, and I hope you will be welcome to communicate with us in the chat and let us know where you are calling from. If you don't already know, my name is Brian. I'm the community manager at CFO South Africa, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to this webinar, which is brought to you in partnership with Sage. Among other things, Sage is a global market leader for technology that provides small and medium businesses flexibility, visibility, and efficiency to manage finances, operations, and people. So in this session, as I mentioned earlier, it's a blueprint for human-centric digital transformation. And we'll get to an opportunity to look at the power of people and technology in elevating human work. A few familiar names, I think, have attended the session, so it's good to have you all. Please say hello, so we can all interact with all the participants. So thank you very much. I see Gareth, Gugu, Henny, Itai, Johan, and a couple of the colleagues from Sage as well, Kalis, Dora. Good to all have you all on this call. Hello, hello, hello. Do tell us which city you're in, just for fun, Tell us where you are and how you're doing today. Zimkita, good morning, and Susanna, good morning as well. Let us know your businesses and where you are. So Lauren in Cape Town, see, I knew it will be far and wide. Lesibana, where are you? Kumbula Tlamini, Kate, tell us where everybody is. Karen is at the University of Pretoria and really looking forward to this session. Gugu is in Johannesburg. Gareth is also in Johannesburg. So it turns out there's probably just one person from Cape Town. Is it, Lauren? But fantastic to have you all. Really looking forward to this session. I'm grateful because you finally warmed up and you hit that chat button. I was getting a bit nervous earlier. But be that as may, it is the power of people, technology in elevating human work. So I'm hoping we've already started to see it at play. When done right, digital transformation is an inclusive metamorphosis. It's about digitizing the business and elevating human work, as you perhaps have gathered up to now. I have no doubt that today you'll discover how in digitally transformed business, you can find improved processes, new business models, and most importantly, perhaps an engaged talent, right? So again, once again, great to see you all. My name is Brian, if you didn't already know, and it's not every day that I'll get this fantastic panel with me from Sage and our esteemed guests from FNB Commercial to join us. So feel free to ask any questions in the chat. So we'll be able to address them as we proceed today. So without further ado, I'm going to call on our esteemed guests, and I'll perhaps start with Yudhvir Seetharam, who's the head of analytics and insights and research at FNB Commercial. I'll let him kind of introduce himself quickly, and then I'll move along to Mohammed from Sage to do the same, and they'll give back to me, and I'll tell you how this day will run. Yudhvir, over to you.
Thanks, Brian. Awesome. Thanks and welcome to everyone as well. So as Brian mentioned, I look after analytics, insights, and research for FNB Commercial. A lot of our work relates to how, especially in the business-to-business context, how do you use data in order to make better decisions, whether that is for an internal purpose, like creating more efficiency, and ultimately looking after your customer. So a lot of the topics, the themes that are going to come out of today's discussion focus on those two things. Underlying all of them is how to use data in order to make better decisions. Thanks. Thanks,
Yudhvir. Mohammed, over to you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks, Brian. It's really great to be with you guys this morning. I'm the Product Marketing Director for Africa Middle East, and we engage with many businesses, business to consumer, business to business, and really take our customers to the digital transformation. Many of our customers have been with us for many years, and it's an ongoing journey as to how they make improvements into their businesses. And we sort of advise them as to what is the market trends, what is best practice, and really take a keen interest in making sure they're successful, because their success is our success. So yeah, that's really where I play a part, Brian, and to the audience. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mo. Yeah, it's an honor to have you both for this session. So I'm really looking forward into this deep dive and get a sense of what really this blueprint is. Really keen, like most people on this call, to learn. So to kick us off, I'm going to run a quick poll. I always like to get a sense of the type of people that are in the audience. Let's see, I'm going to run a quick poll and ask a question to sort of kick us off. I'm going to ask a question. You'll probably see it come up on your screens shortly. So here we go. Start that again. Here we go. Give me a second. There we go. This is a correct question coming up your way now. Since we are on a digital transformation, what do you think digital transformation is? Right? It's a question. Well, it's not really a question. It's one of those sentences that you have to complete. Digital transformation, ... is all about technology, is not about technology. Harms humans more than it helps them. Helps humans more than it harms them. Give us a sense of where you are. I'd like to see the amount of people that will take part. Please take part. If we can hit the 80% participation mark, I'll be well pleased. For this, that'll give us some good insights on the type of people we have here. So there you go. Digital transformation, ... is all about technology, is not about technology. Harms humans more than it helps them. Helps humans more than it harms them. let's have a look at what people are saying. So we're quickly up to the 70-odd% mark. If we get to 80, like I said, I'll be pleased. If we can get to 80, I'll be very happy. We're sitting at 76. Going once, I'm going to end the session. I think it's a good indication of where people are. I'm going to end our poll, and I'm going to show what the results are quickly. So, Mo, I'm going to come to you quickly. So 38% of people say it's all about technology versus overwhelming 77% who says it helps humans more than it harms them. Any surprises here?
Not entirely, Brian, and I'll tell you why. Because it's good to see that that a fair amount of the audience, the majority of the audience, actually believes it helps humans. And I think that's really what we're trying to, bring across. The technology, and even the 38% that voted for technology, yes, it's about technology, but more importantly, it's there to help. It's to help us make our jobs easier. It's to help us sort of expedite, the processes. So I'm glad to see that, the fear factor in the audience is not there. And that is typically what we have to deal with, because many a times we engage with different sorts of audiences, small businesses to fairly large businesses, and there is, there is that concerns that if we automate and we digitize our processes, what becomes of our jobs? And I think it's a valid concern in many instances, but overall, I think we're trying to dispel that myth that no, it's not about taking over your job. It's really about making you smarter in your job and making life easier for you.
Of course, we always like to feel a little bit smarter. Always welcome. Yudhvir, there's still, we're talking close to 40% that say it's all about technology. Any surprises there?
I guess those are the ones that are more of the fearful type. so hopefully by the end of the webinar we do try and lower that number quite a bit. It's technology plays a role, but it is not the role in digital transformation.
Absolutely. So I hope we can get to the sort of the crux of that today. So I know that as we set off on our way on this webinar, I know that Mo had prepared something to kick us off and lay the foundation for this session. So Mo, whenever you're ready, I think it's a presentation that you have, perhaps takes us through by just hitting the share button on your screen, and then we'll be good to go. And over to you, Mo. You are live and on camera.
Great, thanks, Brian. Can you see my screen there, Brian? Fantastic. Great. So I think, just kicking off, I don't want to sort of bore you with PowerPoint, but really we thought it would be important for us to set the context as to what is digital transformation. And we thought we'll just quickly go through a presentation and then sort of move into the panel discussion that actually, discusses the various aspects of digital transformation. So I think the term digital transformation, has been tossed around in the recent years to describe a technology first means to transform businesses. But what really is digital transformation? Is it IT modernization? Is it process optimization? Or is it some human-focused business imperative? And in today's session, we hope to dispel that. We're going to focus on how manual processes can be replaced by digital processes, and putting people first rather than making them obsolete, and how technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, and big data can help alleviate the work of humans. So in today's session, we're going to unpack the way we define digital transformation, how digital transformation puts people first, and really it's about how it becomes a critical enabler that is focused around human-centric, and where the human actually plays an important part in transforming the digital processes. So let's just unpack what digital transformation actually means, because often, in engagements with multiple customers, etc., out there, everyone's got their own, idea of what digital transformation means. But if you look at Wikipedia, It's got an explanation of what digital transformation is all about, and you can always go and kind of Google that. But our definition of digital transformation is really about transforming people, processes, and technology to interact for better outcomes. So specifically, we want to see that we have a better human outcome that spans across every aspect of the business. And so when we talk of digital transformation, we're talking about converting from a business model that was designed around people performing tasks and processes that was very manual, clunky, and time consuming, to one that is a model designed around a smooth digital interaction with digital automation. And we'll talk about it in a couple of examples. So really, digital transformation is about fundamentally changing the business model in a way that it improves the lives of humans. So let's, if I can just quickly, go to an example. We talk of paper maps versus electronic maps. The maps that we use nowadays is, for example, Google Maps, Apple Maps, etc. Prior to this, we would basically be looking at paper maps. We would determine the available routes, pick the best route to go through, and then translate that entire process from a paper map into visually seen and focusing on you getting to where you've got to go through with regards to the journey. And then came about, the Garmin GPSs, and then finally we've got Google Maps on our phones, which have suddenly transformed the way we travel. Because no longer do you need to sort of memorize the route and understand the landmarks before you take different, intersections and so forth. It's about just give me your address, you key that in, and you can enjoy the journey to wherever your destination is. You don't have to be stressed out looking, okay, am I at the right location? Did I find the landmark? Am I going in the right direction? I mean, you've got now things like Waze maps, for example, that even tells you about where to find cameras, speed tracking cameras, and so forth. And so suddenly, your experience, you're actually enjoying the journey of where you're getting to, as opposed to stressing as to how you're going to get there. Now, that's a very simplistic example that we as consumers have now embraced, and it's a given fact. We now sort of use Google Maps for almost everything and anything out there. And so similarly, there's a whole lot of other examples that we will discuss later on in today's presentation and panel discussion as to how you can take different business processes and actually automate that. So we talk about an all-inclusive metamorphosis, and Brian alluded to this in his introduction. So what is really an inclusive metamorphosis? What does this basically mean? Okay, it's basically about keeping both people and technology in mind when making these changes. And so when we digitize a process, it's about understanding what is it and what is the human factor behind that, and keeping that process all inclusive of including the human factor as part of the technology process. And the metamorphosis is really about progressing from one stage to another. And there are changes that happen at each stage as you get closer to digitizing your entire business. And as you digitize, this really helps to elevate, the human aspect of it. So really, it's about taking those two aspects and having an inclusive metamorphosis from different stages as you digitize this. So we often talk about, and when we talk of digitalization, we have different audiences. We have the CEOs, we have the CIOs, we have the CFOs. And considering that, obviously we're talking to an audience that is primarily CFOs or involved in some sort of finance, we've, from a Sage perspective, we've done multiple surveys, and we've done surveys called Finance 1.0, 2.0, and the last that we did was a Finance CFO 3.0, which was in 2020. And this was really to sort of understand from CFOs, like, how is their role transforming in the business? Are they having to play a leading role in transforming business? Or is it merely that, they're just still crunching the numbers via spreadsheets and, doing what a typical accountant or CFO would have been doing the last 20, 30 years ago? Well, interestingly enough, you can see the stats from this. 46% of CFOs say they're now facing an increased demand to provide overall business advice. Now, that's interesting because the business is not just looking up to the CEO. It's like, the CEO and the CIO is including the CFO into making these decisions. And we see that happening. We see a CIO, for example, approaching us, asking us for, what is our digital road, what is our cloud roadmap in terms of product stacks. and they pulling in the CFOs because the CFO plays an equally important role as to when the decision takes place for them in the business. And so we've seen 76% of CFOs say they're now in a capacity to drive digital transformation in businesses. And that obviously is quite an interesting step. While a whooping 94% of CFOs that were and financial controls that were interviewed says that technology plays an important role when it comes to financial aspects of the business, let alone operational aspects. And so, we'll discuss in the panel a little bit later as well, what is it and how these sort of things can actually play a role in businesses. But ultimately, I think digital transformation is depicted in this slide, where a transition is required to move from manual processes of today, where less than 7% of the function is focused on organizational strategy, to the tomorrow, which is the future, where you have a greater proportion of the function that is focused on strategic decision-making and insights and analytics. And as Yudhvir spoke about, we've seen a greater demand for data becoming quite an important aspect of business, simply because people need to make the right decisions and spend more time on strategizing as opposed to doing the number crunching and checking the checks and balances and making sure that that's all in place. So Brian, I think that was just very quickly to set the scene, and hopefully that gives lends the message a little bit clearer to everyone about what digital transformation is. And over to you, in terms of what else do we need to discuss and how else can we help the audience define what digital transformation is?
Yeah, thanks for that, Mo. Very, very insightful. So while you give me back the reins, I'm going to go to Yudhvir quickly. So Yudhvir, FNB is often like on the forefront of this digital transformation, right? You're known in the country, for this. So give us a sense of what human-centric digital transformation at FNB Commercial looks like. What are some of the things that you're doing? How deep are you in this game, etc.?
Awesome. So I think the first starting point is to ensure that you know what and why you are doing it. So are you doing it just because other people are doing it? Are you doing it because you want to increase the efficiency of running a business? And ultimately, are you doing it because you want to have a better relationship with the customer? So trying to find the why from more of a culture perspective became super, super important. Once that was established, the next part is then about actively going out to each of your different areas, to your process areas, your technology areas, to figure out what it is that they can do in order to make things more efficient. So the first part of this was about driving efficiency, and then slowly you start to move away, if I can call it that, from driving efficiency to actually what can you do to make the customer's life significantly better. So it started off as an efficiency drive, and it ended up being placing the customer, their needs, their wants, etc., at the heart of what you're trying to go and do. That's been our journey, and it's been we've started on it quite some time ago. Where we at now is significantly more focused on what our customers want and how do we provide for those solutions.
And that's absolutely helpful because I went in and I launched that question. I mean, we didn't have it in the first poll, but just to kind of see where the fear state is. So I think businesses and and individuals have kind of moved along from that fear factor. Now it's really time where we want to get value from this, and I think you've already started to kind of allude to some of these perspectives. So Mo, I'll come to you quickly, perhaps for the next part. You spoke, you showed us a slide or two, I think, on there about the role of finance specifically the CFO. Let's double click on that quickly. And, what should a CFO be doing right now to foster this human-centric digital transformation? Because we can see from the poll, the fear is gone. Now it's about value time. What should a CFO be doing?
So Brian, digital transformation doesn't happen overnight. It's incremental. And so, the first thing is to start off small. As the famous slogan goes, you need to crawl, then walk, then run. And similarly, an approach like this needs to be used. So it's really about understanding, what is it? Look at a particular process, and I'll give you a very typical example. in many businesses, and we've seen this typically, in a good use case is like, signing off authorizations of a purchase order or some sort of document that requires it. And typically what happened was, businesses out there would have to, get a document. You would then have to take the document, print it out, take it to the CFO's office or to whoever's in charge of, and kind of wait for him if he's in a meeting, or kind of stalk him, and then eventually get him to sign the paper off. And he might say, look, I need a second signature, and you've got to go get the CEO's signature, and you've got to run to that office and get the PA to assist with the whole process. And that typically is a massive time waster, let alone, allowing you to be more efficient and productive. And simplistically, very simply put, you can digitize a process whereby implementing, things like a document manager that actually allows you to have workflows built in and allows different people in the process to actually sign that off electronically or digitally. And suddenly that takes away a huge amount of inefficiency within the business. And most importantly, allows you to work more smarter and focus on getting things done. So you can kick off the process, almost immediately. And the workflow thereafter would take its course to go to the person next to authorize, and thereafter, until eventually it's fully authorized, it gives you a notification, and you've got that document which you can then email on to the client or to whoever else for that matter. So that's a very simplistic way. Don't think, many a times it seems to be like a huge task. But if you take it incrementally and you look at it like, let's start off with our most basic, process that we can automate. And when you see the fruits of that suddenly working, it's a motivation. And once you get that motivation going, you start to look at various other aspects of the business and how you go about automating that.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing you say, Mohammed, is that you're essentially freeing up time for humans to spend more on value kind of adding work, right? That's really what I get a sense. So you've got more time to spend on this value adding task. And Yudhvir, if I come to you, and perhaps sticking on that point, I mean, I'd imagine like at FNB, you're moving, from manual tasks to digital workflows with copious amounts of data, and this is done pretty rapidly. How are you dealing with it, with at least the change management component of this? Because this is fairly rapid, isn't it?
Yeah, correct, 100%. So I guess the change management element speaks a lot more about, if you have the right reason, if you have the why, how do you now package that and explain it to your broader business so that it doesn't come across as a fear move? It comes across as, this is how we continue to do better and strive to do better, ultimately increasing our relationships, ultimately increasing our market share. Yeah. So by bringing those in to say that, well, if you are a busy person, how does this process now change your life? And the minute you get buy-in from your employees, getting them to now, if I can say, have that same brand ambassador point for your customers becomes significantly easier. The employees have to buy into the journey. And without that, it becomes like, I have free time. It's like, so now what? Versus, here's what I can now do with my free time. Did you know that you can spend more time on strategy? Did you know you can spend more time on thinking of ideas and trying to figure out how you maintain your market share, how you improve your market share? That why is crucially important, to get buy-in from the employees and then to get buy-in from your customers.
Yeah, fantastic point. So it sounds like we're getting into some of the technical bits, which I can't wait to get into. But to do that, I'm going to go to the audience quickly, right? I've got something else that's going to come up for you. 2 questions this time, right? Before we start getting into some of the technical terms that are being thrown around here. The first question is, do you know the difference between disruption and optimization? We're going to get into that pretty quickly. Do you know the difference between and optimization? If you know, tell us in the chat. What is the difference? Tell us in the chat if you know answer to question. For the 67% of the people that are saying, yes, I know, put it in the chat. Let's see if you know. That's the first question. The second question is, do you know the difference between digitalization and digitization? Right? Let us know. I want to see the people that are saying yes in the chat. Put it in the chat. Give it a crack and tell us if you know the difference between these 2 terms. And I'll go to shortly. I'll go to my guests and they can share some insights on what they know about these 2. question. So first one, do you know the difference, disruption, optimization, and the difference between digitalization and digitization? So it's interesting that we've got a lot of no's on the digitalization and digitization question, which is quite interesting. And quite a lot of people didn't even realize there was a difference. So there you have it. That's that poll. I'm going to end it. And I'm going to go back to Yudhvir quickly, because Yudhvir, I remember when we last spoke, you did mention there was a confusion around digitalization and digitization. Set us straight. Let's do it now once and for all.
Awesome. So exactly to the slides that were being shared, right? There was an amazing definition that said digital transformation talks about people, talks about process, talks about technology, right? So that's the umbrella. When we zoom in and we want to make something more efficient, we want to automate something, we want to remove the, let's call it the manual steps that are taken in order to spend more time thinking. That is digitizing something. So if you want to digitize a process, to the example that Mo gave as well, that's a great example of saying, well, instead of me having to walk from one person to the next, can I not just get a signable PDF document? I am digitizing the process of a whoever trying to sign something. Digital transformation is broader. It says, yes, you need to digitize processes. Yes, you need to keep up to date with any technological changes, but those two are not enough. You must also bring people into the equation. So digital transformation is the umbrella. In order to achieve digital transformation, you can say it as like one step or one part of it is digitizing processes.
Yeah, I love coming onto these webinars. I'm always learning. I'm certainly one of the ones that didn't realize there was a difference at all. Mo, I want to come to you, and is go back to, in case you want to chime in on that question as well, but more specifically, the disruption and optimization question. You know, there's a 60-30 kind of scenario here. People are saying, yeah, I know what the difference. Set us straight. What is the difference here?
Yeah, Brian. So that's interesting to see the split there, and I think. I think really, if I could sort of explain it in layman's terms, you know, disruption is obviously something that never existed in the business altogether, and that eventually, you know, you sort of implement something that is completely new to everyone in terms of the process, in terms of the technology or the tools that have been used as well. And the learning curve obviously means that, you know, you've disrupted that part of the business. Optimization really is about something that has already existed in the business, and how you improve on that. And I'll give you an example. You know, we implement AI technologies in our products. And for example, we've just recently launched what we call the Intelligent GL. And what the Intelligent GL is all about is really optimizing what you've already had. So any, you know, financial solution needs to have a general ledger. So that's always been there. But we further optimized that process by actually implementing AI capabilities, so that, for example, the financial controller or the CFO does not need to number crunch to lines and lines and thousands of lines of data. You know, the AI is now doing that for them, and it's validating. All they've got to do is validate yes or no, I'm happy with the results. And then eventually this creates a continuous thrust on their data. So that's a process that is automated. So you would have, for example, always been using a financial solution, a computerized financial solution. We implement AI technologies to that now means we've optimized that process. Whereas someone who, for example, who's never ever used any computerized solution, and a typical scenario would be a startup that typically would do invoicing either manually or Microsoft Excel as an example, and then they go and implement a financial solution which now takes care of everything for them, from the billing to the emailing of the invoice to the statement to the electronic payments that you would do via FNB. So we have, for example, direct imports from FNB. So previously you had to manually download the statement and then import it into your accounting solution. Now with the technology advances, FNB has basically allowed and catered for direct bank feeds. So this means the users no longer need to go through a 3 or 4 step process. As soon as they go into the bank reconciliations, and so long as they've already done the pre-authentications with FNB, the data instantaneously appears there, and they just got to review the data and decide whether or not it's reconciled or not. So suddenly, that would be a disruption where you suddenly had nothing, you suddenly implemented something of that solution. I hope that sort of explains it to the audience a bit better as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if the audience have questions, this is a fantastic time to start putting those questions in the chat. We'll try and pull them through. Do we have time, perhaps closer to the end of this, to kind of go through your questions? But if you feel free to utilize the chat. Mo, I'm going to stay with you. There's a lot of things that you spoke about, and how simple is it though to transform your business, to do this human-centric transformation? How do I get ready, to embrace this automation and transformation? Where do I start? So if I want to do this, and what is the role of a trusted partner? Because you spoke about the relationship of Sage and FNB. Perhaps you can give us a sense of that.
Yeah, so I think, Brian, firstly, it's understanding your ecosystem, understanding your current situation, and that could mean that you've got, some parts of your business automated while the rest of it might not be automated. And it doesn't mean, as I explained earlier, it doesn't mean you've got to do it all in one big, you can basically take small incremental steps towards this. But the first and foremost is to understand your existing situation, your existing ecosystem, and then understand fundamentally what would be the greatest impact if I had to make a change. So strategically, understand that, say, okay, for example, we spend a lot of time, for example, trying to get documents signed off and then when to move that. So if I had to automate that process with a very simplistic program, and really, we deal with small businesses that are startup businesses. They don't have huge budgets. They don't have huge financial cash flows just to go and spend on technology like some sort of large corporate company there. And so yet they're able to have an impact in terms of what they're doing by simply understanding a simple process of their business and automating that. And that simple process could be as simple as something like automating your invoicing, as an example, right? And a typical example is, the guy who came to fix my garage door some months back. He gives me a manual invoice, but I notice he's got an email, he's got a website. So I kind of realize, this guy's got some sort of tech savviness in him. And so I ask him and I say, Franz, you're giving me this manual invoice. Have you ever considered, doing automated invoices? And he's like, I've always thought about it, but I don't know how to go about doing that. And then, we introduced him to a very simplistic invoicing solution. And now he sends you an automated invoice. So when he comes on site, he immediately sends you an invoice by quickly selecting, simplistically a call out fee, and then whatever party is charging you, he sends it off immediately. And it then allows for an online payment as well. Now, this is something that he just thought was just inevitable, like he couldn't have done this. Now it's really taken those small steps, and this has created a huge difference in his business, because now when he does work for contractors, he doesn't have to go and create an Excel file and do multiple, lines of invoicing or quotes and then send it off to the multiple contractors. It's all done from one solution. So something very simple like that, right, suddenly creates a huge difference. And so really it's about looking at what will be the greatest impact around something that takes you the longest. And by automating that, you'll suddenly see a world of difference when it comes to saving on time. And that's really what it counts. If you can save time, I think Yudhvir sort of alluded to that. If it saves you time, that means you're now able to sort of spend more time on more strategic parts of your business, growing your business, looking as to how else you can grow your business, as opposed to trying to do all the administrative work, which can be automated very easily.
Yeah, absolutely. Saving time, I think that keeps coming up as quite prevalent, and one of the reasons we need to, get onto this journey. Yudhvir, I'm going to come to you, and perhaps with a two-part question. You define digitalization and digitization for us quite well there. At FNB, which one of the two are you focusing on? Is there time to say, well, this is where we are now doing digitization, and then now we're in digitization, or they are perhaps mutually exclusive activities? That's the first part. And the second part of my question is, I want to speak to you as a customer, and I want to speak to FNB as a service provider to customers. How does the customer fit in this digital transformation journey from an FNB's perspective?
Cool, awesome. So I think on the first part, a lot of the effort has been on finding processes that need to be made more efficient. And especially, I guess, when you're looking at larger organizations, you don't really, at the very, let's say, basic level, have an idea of all the processes that go on in your organization, because you might have had someone that left 10 years ago and like didn't bother to write down all the stuff that they do. so the main thing over here has always been on focusing on what processes we can try to digitize, to make them more efficient and more automated. That is sort of like divided into two. What are you doing that will benefit you internally? So like as an example, signing purchase orders, right? It's very much an internal thing. Versus number two, what can you digitize in order to meet the needs of the customer? So you might be very good at reducing all these internal efficiencies, but if your customer is still not gaining anything at the end of the day, then what's the point of doing so? So it's always a balancing act to say, okay, you want to digitize something, very, if I can say, ruthlessly figure out if this is going to help yourself only and or help the customer only. And whatever ends up helping the customer needs to then have a higher priority in doing so. So that's been our focus, to then say there's certain processes, especially when running a business, where, like, you know, purchase orders come in, trying to go and do your bookkeeping becomes an issue. The minute you want to get into complicated lending type structures and complicated arrangements in the investment banking space, how can you still maintain the human interaction, but at the same time make it as seamless as possible for the customer? So our focus has been significantly much more on the digitizing side, and then zooming out into digital transformation, it then goes and says, all right, are you comfortable that you work for an organization that is digitally inclined in this age? And that's been the sort of slow moving shift of changing your DNA. You work for this institution, they are digitally inclined, so there needs to be this mindset change that happens over there. And that's to I guess a lot of the previous conversations, it's not an overnight thing. It is something that says, okay, fundamentally, you want to make sure that you change for the better, but also for the good of your customer. On the second point of where are we and how do we involve the customer in this as well, there's a lot of work that says, well, you are running a business. What are the let's call it pain points, or what are the obstacles that you go through, and how can the bank help you to minimize those obstacles? So a lot of this is not just being designed with, let's say, the internal stakeholder in mind, but also with the customer. There has to be a purpose to what you do. And we've seen that, and it's quite valid statement. There are certain businesses that fully embrace digital. There's other businesses that simply by the nature of how they operate, they're not going to have 100% digital in their space. So it's about trying to figure out what works for you. If you are an inherently busy person, I'm not going to have time to go and do phone calls during the day. So maybe something more electronic might be suitable for me. Versus if I'm running a multi-million rand organization, something that is, let's say, interacting with your service providers or your suppliers, etc., on a digital basis might be a bit too far for you to go. There would be some percentage that you can, but you don't want to overdo it. You still need to maintain your human touch, your human element to this. And we learned this, everybody learned this in such a, I'm going to say good way, although it may not sound good right now. COVID taught us this, that human elements are very, very important. And you have great examples of businesses who had to digitally transform. Otherwise, they couldn't literally survive during level 5 and level 4 lockdown. So that journey of being water thrown in the face. Are you working in a digital environment? What percentage of your work should be digital? COVID and lockdown has taught us to figure out what those percentages are, which differs to the size of the company, which also differs based on the sector that you operate within.
Yeah, absolutely. What I'm getting from you there is, it's important to figure out, what works for you. So figure out as a department or as a company, what it is that you absolutely need. And yes, COVID has been absolutely ruthless in terms of getting a lot of businesses on that journey, off the journey sometimes. But also, I think I like the point where you say you need to be ruthlessly clear about what it is that you are calling value and what you deliver on. And with that, I want to go to Mo, and perhaps with the same kind of question, Mo. How does from your perspective, how does the customer fit in on this digital transformation journey for you?
Yeah, Brian, I think before I answer that, I just want to kind of elaborate on something that you bigger sort of, hit on, and that is the COVID scenario. We know that COVID, if anything, when it hit in 2020, this accelerated many businesses' digital transformation. IDC had done some research in 2020, specifically in our region, and 51% of businesses had to accelerate their digital roadmap by 1 year. And I'm just looking at these stats here because I recall we were sort of evaluating those stats, because we've seen a tremendous amount of customer interaction around, looking for advice on as to how they can digitize their business from a solutions perspective, be it financial management, ERP, overall from that perspective. And I think, you can see that sense coming through simply because, to give you an example, I dealt with a financial services company in my own personal capacity. And prior, I recall they would either come to the office or I would have to go to them and we would sign the documents. And recently, about 2 months back, they got a hold of me and said, look, we need to sign some new documents, etc. And I was like, okay, so how are we going to do this? They said, no, we're going to send you an email. And I got the email and it was all, I just had to basically sign electronic. And I said, wow, couldn't you have done this way back? But suddenly, when COVID came and they realized people can't meet and, everyone was kind of like working in isolation, they had to find ways to suddenly make this happen. And so, they once again was a typical example of how something got, a business digitized a process that was quite manual before. And we never questioned it before. It was kind of like a norm. We just accepted, okay, fine, can you meet me or I'll meet you? And, kind of, you kind of realize it's a waste. I would have spent at least, I recall, at least 20 minutes trying to get to the office, right? Then getting the signature. You're wasting at least close to an hour. Whereas now it was done instantaneously. It was in like, a couple of minutes. So really, that's where, these advantages come through. Coming back to your question, Brian, as to how, the consumer can look at digitizing aspects of their business. It's really, and I'd like to sort of, go back to the banking option as well. When you start to understand, I mean, if you look at it, today people are viewing emails on their phones. Right? At one stage, emails was kind of like you only looked at emails on your desktop, then your laptop. And now finally, you can instantaneously look at emails on your phone. And you suddenly realize that, if I can look at emails on my phone, that has suddenly made me a bit more, tech savvy around being able to respond to something much more quicker. And I guess you've always got to kind of find, the divide between, work versus personal time, etc. But at the same time, you find that there are so many different solutions out there that actually allow you to, digitize aspects of whatever you're doing, be it workflows in the business, between phones, between your mobile phone, between your laptops, etc., without you having to sort of be, you could be almost anywhere. You could be at the airport and you could sort of approve a purchase order or some sort of, document that is needed. And I think really from a business perspective, it's really identifying that. I think we alluded to that before in the conversation. Really identify, the most pressing issue that you have in the business, and once you identify that, you automate that, and you see the results that come through from that point onwards.
So, Mo, a question I'm getting here, just on the sidelines from the audience, is what about the security aspect? We talk about human-centric transformation, right? Is the risk kind of increased because of that? What are some of the things that you're doing perhaps to manage the risk that come associated with, right? Because a lot of the time in this transformation, it's information that we say, yes, it's human-centric, so perhaps it's humans that are inputting the data. So what you put in was what you get out as well, right? So there's two parts. Security and data integrity as well is often an issue when we bring human-centric to it. Can you share some insights?
Yeah, so Brian, I think, I recall sort of about maybe at least about 5 years ago, security was a big issue whenever you spoke to anyone regarding, operating in a digital environment. And as, and I got to thank the banking industry for this, because I think the banks set the standard. More and more people started utilizing, internet banking, and then utilizing the banking on their mobiles and so forth. And the consumer kind of understood that, okay, it's the most important part of, I mean, it's my money, right? If that's not safe, then what is safe, right? And the banks obviously, have got a very high standard, and I'm sure Yudhvir can get point when it comes to data security and the sort of the checks and balances that are put behind that technology platform. And so similarly, when it comes to, they've set the standard, and many other vendors, including vendors like us, have pretty much followed that standard. And because they're at the core of making sure they're always at keeping the customer's interest safe and sound from a digital, from a security perspective, they're always making sure they've got those enhancements in place. And we follow that protocol. There's obviously standards that's set not only by the banking industry, but obviously overall within the industry around encryption and safeguarding your data, etc. And so we follow those standards, and there's multiple standards out there that we need to comply to, and not only us, but all vendors out there. Things like SOC 2, which is a standard that you've got to basically maintain, your customers' data in a particular way and format. And if you're not compliant, they just don't give you the certification. And so in order for the vendor to be able to give customers assurances, we've got to make sure we're compliant, and therefore we get those certifications in place. So I think in that respect, the consumers, we find it's less of an issue nowadays. Yes, it's the question that comes up, but the question that comes up more is about the availability as opposed to data security. What is your SLA? What is your service level agreement around making sure I got a 24/7, 99.98% availability and access to my data, as opposed to, is my data secure? And that is always still a question, but I think it's less of an issue now, primarily because people have gotten more used to technology and have become more comfortable with the fact that their data is secure.
So Yudhvir, I see you nodding and agreeing, but I would like to hear, at least from the from an FNB perspective, right? This security issue, and also you did touch on the COVID issue and how that plays out as well. With kind of remote working, you want to do this human-centric, but you've got now your teams are now working from home, etc. What impact does it have on the business?
Yeah, so it's quite a significant impact, hey? Because as was mentioned, it's something that's personal to you. So you need to make sure that you have trust with whoever has given you that responsibility to keep something safe. So it's very much around, I can tell you that I have all of these security protocols, but what else can I do in order to grow this relationship of trust? So as like a simple example, seeing a list of statements that says your data is secure doesn't give as much emotion compared to being told that. Very, very strange example that I'm giving. If I'm getting you to go and read something that says, X, Y, and Z is 100% secure, versus I'm taking the time out to speak to you, see you, physically, virtually, whatever the case might be, that conveys much more emotion to it. So the security protocols and the advances in technology, there's significant work that's always being done to make sure that you are, if I can say, disrupting the potential for trust to be eroded. So what can you do to stay one step ahead of finding loopholes in your own systems, in your own processes, and being able to find those gaps and fill them using either a process to cover them or using a technological advancement to go and cover them. So the implementation, if I can say, is actually quite easy. The harder part is then saying, well, how can I look you in the eye and tell you that your data is safe? That's where the human element still comes into play. So working from home, and if I can say move away from the customer to an internal perspective, you need your employees to have that level of I don't know if belonging is the right word, but the level of responsibility that says, do you know that if you're working at home, at a coffee shop, or wherever, the responsibility is still on you to make sure that you keep your customers' trust, whether you are front office, middle office, back office. This added responsibility of saying you are dealing with confidential information. How do you maintain that level of integrity no matter where you are? And it forces your employees to start thinking as if it's actually theirs. And by having that sense of belonging, you give your all, and thereby by you giving your all, the customer feels it, and they, you know, that sort of causing causing one person to help the other. That loop, that feedback loop, keeps on growing stronger.
Yeah, I feel it is absolutely important, and I think it's also an opportunity to get some feedback from the audience. If you have any questions, please throw them in the chat. We are at that time where we would like to receive some of your questions. Otherwise, we'll continue having our discussion with my two esteemed guests on here. Yudhvir, I'm going to stay with you just because you were speaking. Let's look at the bank 5 years ago, right? And compare it to where we are now, given this rapid transformation that's happened in the past, just to see how successful this human-centric digital transformation is going. What are some of the things that you used to do in the past that have definitely fallen away to what's the way you are working right now?
Awesome. I think one great example is using robots to actually go and say, okay, if I am giving you an ID document or a home affairs document, the fact that it's a standard RSA ID or standard, you know, address on a telecom bill or whatever, the position is always at the same place. So how do you very quickly, similar to how your phones go and have these amazing features to like zoom into people, you know, I detect a face or I detect writing, etc. Being able to implement that so that if you want to open up an account, how do we minimize the time between you submitting something, a human being going and checking, oh really, does an ID number have this number of digits? Like, you know, spending that time more efficiently to actually speed up your account opening. That's been one massive win over the past 5 years. How do you go and open up and start your relationship in such a way that it is seamless, number one, and number two, it is enjoyable? So that's been one great advantage of our journey. The next one says, okay, now that we've digitized, so like if you remember the pyramid that Mo was showing, now that you've digitized certain parts of that pyramid, how do you now take that time to develop more strategy? And strategy is not just a thing of here's what I want to do. Strategy is a thing of what should I be doing based on what the customer is telling me. So you start moving away from, if I can say, optimizing stuff into saying, okay, how do I now start to disrupt certain things? If my customer wants a solution, what is the best way for me to try and beat that solution? What should be my strategy going forward in the next whatever, 5 years, 50 years? So you slowly start to see that part of, here's a process that was changed. I've done the what. Now let me move on to the how. How do I ensure that in the future, I do not have the same problem again? So like you start to change culture and mindset. And then the final part of the puzzle is the why. It says, okay, I change the process. I now have something in place to reevaluate every year, etc. And then my final step is, okay, why am I really doing this? I thought I was doing it just to go and save money, but like, you know, in the reality of it, it's not just about saving money, it's about making sure that there's a lifetime relationship with my customer. So going through those three phases, I would go and say, you're talking about probably for large organizations, probably about a 10-year journey on those, because a lot of the times you're not going to go and develop something overnight, neither are you going to change the DNA of the employees overnight. But being able to start small and say, okay, what do I want to change? How long will it take me to go and change it? Those incremental wins now you actually go and look back and say, oh wow, really, 5 years ago you couldn't open up an account on your app, and now you can. And, you know, even worse, I need to now take a selfie. Like, no, that's a bit too, like, you know, why can't I just do it the normal way? And like, you then start to like figure out, well, if this is actually better, and like, you know, whoever, generation X or Z or whatever they call, if they now are being attracted to that, how do you keep them on that same page? On the other hand, for your older generations and your business customers, how do you now start to maintain that level of trust by looking you in the eye, by talking to you about stuff, but being helped by the data? So if I can, that second part, I'm very tempted to introduce the word augmented intelligence as opposed to artificial intelligence. How do you help the human to continue on doing their job better? You know, and being able to have those conversations. That's what we've seen on the consumer side and on the business side.
Mo, as we wrap up, I'm gonna come to you quickly, and I want to hear over and above this. We know what Sage can do. What else should people be looking at least from the Sage table, in terms of transformation enhancements? What else do we have coming out of the Sage table?
So Brian, there's lots of things we're working on. Obviously with cloud being sort of the current market trend, we're looking at technologies that basically look at automating multiple processes within existing businesses. I spoke about the intelligent GL. That's something we've sort of worked on. We're working on something called intelligent time, which is about to be released. It's already released in the US first. We're going to be releasing soon in South Africa. This is specifically around automating your time in billing. Typically, time in billing is something that many professional services out there do. And the manual capturing is either done weekly or monthly, depending on sort of the volumes that you're having to do, in some instances daily. And by automating this with artificial intelligence, you merely specify, sort of the fields, and this collects the information for you and allows you to validate. But more importantly, we get people that get supply invoices on a daily basis, and having to recapture that. It could be anywhere between 10 lines per invoice up to 15, 20, 30, 50 lines per invoice. And we're basically implementing what we refer to as RPA, robotic process automation, which effectively allows you to map the fields for the first time around between your supply invoice and your accounting solution, and thereafter it automates that process for you. And so what it means is that you spend, you literally spend less time, in fact, spend almost no time capturing, but just receiving the invoice automated into your system, validating that you're happy with it, processing it, and spending more time on, more meaningful work as opposed to menial tasks. So those are some of the things that you can expect. And, ongoing improvements to sort of direct bank feeds, as we spoke about, that we've done with the likes of FNB. That's the first of its kind right now, and many other improvements that we're looking to sort of coordinate between many other third-party vendors, which would be other third-party vendors, including the customer and Sage.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, that is it from today's show. I want to say thank you to Mohammed Mosam, who's from Sage AMEA, and Yudhvir Seetharam from FNB Commercial, for sharing us some of these insights and how to get onto your digital transformation journey. Some of the things that you need to definitely look out for as you get onto this road. Is, I think we've passed the stage where there's a bit of fear, but I think most people are ready to go on. So go out and see these top individuals, find out what else that you can do if you need your business to be assisted. So what's happening next? Loads of webinars lined up for you as we get on the way. On the 24th of August, we've got another case study with Process, and it's talk about global reporting and also digital transformation. So good to see you. There's a lot of that being talked about now. And then we move on to Workday on the 26th of August. What's keeping CFOs up at night? I'm sure it's still quite a few things, and digital transformation might be one of those things. So tune in to and look out to hear what some of those things are and what the priorities might be. Tax season, tame your tax dispute frustrations, right? It's around at that time. So we've got this coming up on the 1st of September. And with that, I want to thank you all for joining us this morning, and I wish you all a fantastic afternoon. Have a good day. Thank you.